Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone, for welcoming us for this, I think, very special occasion. There's a lot that we have to share in terms of the history that Toussaint Louverture College represents in Poughkeepsie. But in particular, I would like to thank everyone for just recognizing the the sixth president of Toussaint Louverture College, a real gem and a mecca in the city of Poughkeepsie. Here with us today, Dr. Anita Hemmings. Toussaint Louverture for over 150 years has represented this history. Dr. Hemmings is not only the first president to come from an arts background. Her training is mostly in drama and film and theater. She can be seen in various independent films and television programs such as Linoleum, starring Jim Gaffigan and Ray Seahorn. For those fans of Succession, you might also have spotted Dr. Hemmings in the role of the city district attorney, and the upcoming show Before, starring Billy Crystal on Apple TV. I should mention that Dr. Hemmings is also an incredible scholar, and she has spent a good part of her career researching the lesser-known culture of the 17th and 18th century Afro-Dutch culture, exploring it through traditional folk songs written in, I believe it's Nederhollands?
Nederhollands, yeah.
Nederhollands.
Wait, but the politically correct term in the Netherlands right now is Dutch Creole. But I personally like the word Black Dutch because that's the literal translation.
Okay, so you're witnessing already the consistency of Dr. Hemmings' scholarship. Dr. Hemmings is a consummate researcher, and her publications, I'm happy to say, have finally become a required reading, perhaps in the freshman college years of here at Vassar College and elsewhere, including such titles as Zwarte Piet, How the Dutch Colonized Christmas and Made Blackface Sacred, and of course the classic name many of you may know, I Ain't the Woman Who Said Ain't I a Woman, How Sojourner Truth Proved Freedom Did Not Flow Northward. Let me just say that personally, Dr. Hemmings, your work has been foundational to my practice and to any contemporary artist's practice, I think, and cultural practitioners in general. And it was with pleasure, admiration, and honor that we welcome you here this evening, Dr. Hemmings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here at the intersection of such a wonderful group of artists and academics.
Wonderful. Okay, so why don't we start right there? The idea that it's not despite, but rather because of the fact that you, as an artist, have taken on this role of college president, the only HBCU, I might add, in the Northeast, that this is a reflection not only of yourself, your own personal character, your career trajectory, but also of the college, the spirit of the college as a whole. Can you share a little bit about what it is about an actor that might make a good college president?
Well, it's said that during the Haitian Revolution, there were a few white liberals that fought alongside the slave revolt, and some wearing blackface. So when it comes out to seeking out the sincerity of the benefactors who would like to contribute to the success of Toussaint Louverture College without undue paternalistic influence, I think that a solid education in theatrical arts, including makeup, comes in handy, right? So, I mean, look, at Toussaint, we don't take anything for granted, not our trustees, not our endowment, and certainly not where the scholarship comes from. It's what has allowed us to go from perpetually being the college that was never supposed to happen and never meant to be, to becoming one of the most consequential arts schools in the state. And I'd say probably in the country. We were never supposed to happen. And you know what? We keep happening. We are. Since the incorporation, we've insisted that we've been Black taught, Black administrated, Black funded institution. And so we have to constantly reinvent ourselves to adapt to the conditions of the world that have surrounded us, whether it's segregation in higher education or redlining, or urban renewal, crack cocaine, or COVID-19 for that matter. I mean, the Haitian Revolution taught us to be aware that liberation comes with strings attached. It's not been easy to say no to funders who offer their version of conditional philanthropy. And as president of Toussaint, part of my job is to be not just the chief executive, but a larger goal is I have to be, it's a more generative part of my job to be the chief advocate, right? To convince those that wish us best that we are deserving of the best and that we have the potential to cultivate the best actors, writers, musicians, composers, and even college presidents.
Fascinating. That's great. That's great. Just in terms of historical context, those of you may know this history obviously already, but in the late 19th century, after the Civil War, there was a great debate about whether this entirely new class of really recently emancipated women, men, children were going to be fully capable of the citizenry that had been bestowed upon them, right? And that question played out very publicly between two intellectuals, W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. And the debate centered around whether this new vocation for newly freed blacks would be devoted to industrial arts or classical education. All right, was it going to be working the lathe or Latin? And it was essentially an argument over whether higher education would or would not be destined to creating another form of servitude for those who had just come up from slavery. I believe Toussaint Louverture played a really important role in this debate, did it not?
Well, there was an earlier version of this debate that was played out right here in Poughkeepsie in 1853 between Frederick Douglass and Poughkeepsie's Uriah Boston, who was a successful barber. He wrote in response to some of Douglass's writings where Douglass declared, make your sons mechanics and farmers, not waiters, porters, and barbers. And Uriah Boston threw some heavy shade at him. And he's saying, I know you didn't just call me servile. Tell me you did not call me servile. And this barber took the most famous Black public intellectual to task, and he was never given a dignified public response. Now, the point is, and it goes back to your point about the fitness of an actor for the job of college president, is we should always be questioning the status quo. We should always be questioning our own assumptions about what we think others are capable of doing or not doing. Very often the limitations that we put upon others say more about our own capabilities than about theirs.
That's right.
So at Toussaint, we've designed academic programs to meet students where they are. So giving them the agency to design the kind of study they wish to pursue. This has been at the core of our values. So if you want to show me how running a barber shop is a form of social practice that fosters community cohesion and is a model of radical hospitality and economic dependence, go ahead, do it. And let's see how the college can support you with that and promote that and incorporate it into our curriculum in generative ways. So, academically, I don't see the purpose in creating a distinction between cosmetology and the classics. As a learning institution, we need to be devoted to learning where the two intersect and inform each other.
Excellent. That's just great. Well, since you brought up Poughkeepsie, once known, I'm sure many of you know, as the city of schools, let's talk about how consequential Toussaint was to the history of racial segregation in education, specifically in Poughkeepsie. It's very well detailed in Carlton Maby's Black Education in New York. I see we also have the author of From Main Street to Mainframe here with us in the audience tonight, which also describes a little bit what the climate was like in the post-Civil War era, when there was a sense that Black New Yorkers might finally achieve full citizenship. Can you talk a little bit about what were the challenges that Toussaint Louverture faced, from its very founding?
Right. Okay, well, if you go back to the very beginning with the first African or charity schools established by New York's Manumission Society in the late 1700s, the idea of education of Black people, by Black people, and for Black people was inconceivable, and I dare say it still is. Even after the Civil War, there were always those that couldn't separate teaching Black students from the paternalism of white benefactors, whose mission was to instill the values of religion, work, and self-discipline, as if they couldn't do that on their own, come up with those values. And as a result, the idea of a Black college was a threat even to the Black intelligentsia here, and specifically in and around Poughkeepsie, because in 1870, a Black school meant no higher education than maybe elementary level. And in 1870, a Black school could mean the basement of a church or a dilapidated shack with a dirt floor that would flood and become mud when it rained. And it's just not conceivable that there would be a school for Black students that would be equated with a school for Black excellence, right? Everything proved otherwise. And remember, segregation was status quo at the time. When Black schools were derided for their low attendance, it's because the parents refused to send their kids to these substandard conditions. But in 1873, a Black man named Joseph Rhodes marched his 9-year-old daughter, Marietta, to the all-white Fourth Ward school, and he sat her in the classroom.
Is that right?
Yeah. And Marietta was sent home the same day. You know why? Someone hit her. Right. So you'll be glad to know that thanks to her and her sister Josephine, who was the first Black high school graduate in Poughkeepsie in 1879, the New York State Assembly was forced to abolish school segregation. And then thanks to the Rhodes family, Poughkeepsie High School's second Black student to graduate was none other than Gaius Bolin, Toussaint Louverture's third college president, in a long line of Bolins that served the college.
I'm so glad you mentioned Gaius Bolin. I think we even have an image of him. Yes, there he is. The first Black student to graduate from Williams College. And I'm so glad you mentioned it because his daughter, Jane Bolin.
She was the first Black woman to serve as a judge in the United States.
That's right, true story. I think there's one more picture. There she is. There's Jane. I just have to point out that this is important because Jane also served as the president of Toussaint Louverture after her father, right. Gaius Bolin, retired.
Right, but what you need to know about Toussaint is that it has always been a family affair, just like Vassar has. Now, while the group of individuals that Matthew Vassar assembled as trustees to charter the college included Poughkeepsie's most prominent bankers and lawyers and politicians, one of Toussaint's first benefactors was Poughkeepsie High School janitor, Abraham Bolin, Gaius Bolin's father.
There you go.
Our charter trustees, they were the barbers, the waiters, the coachmen, the whitewashers, the laborers, the cartmen, like our first president, Isaac Deo. That's right. And when I say this college did not fit the status quo, it is in more ways than one. Remember, nobody expected us to survive. And as a result, we could afford to be the only college of any kind to officially write into our charter a policy of equal pay for equal work for all of the faculty, regardless of gender or tenure. And it's what allows us to always maintain a parity when it comes to the student body. Toussaint has always been planned as a college that would make no distinction in gender when it came to the college accessibility. From the beginning, Toussaint filled a hunger anywhere Black New Yorkers felt they deserved a chance, right? You know why it was named after Toussaint Louverture?
Please, I'm sure there's many of us here who are dying to know.
Where did we come up with that name? Well, he was a Haitian revolutionary who established the first Black republic in the world. And to those who vowed to turn the plantocracy into ashes and ruin, Toussaint Louverture was a Black messiah. Because not only did he know how to read and write the language of the colonizer, Toussaint could practice diplomacy with Napoleon, right? So today we might call that code switching, but it was his knowledge that secured not only his freedom, but the freedom of an entire class of people who dared to imagine a world without enslavement. And at Toussaint, that spirit remains. I mean, we don't want our students to just code switch. We want them to be the ones writing the code and rewriting the code.
Fantastic. Amazing. So I'm so glad that you mentioned Isaac Deo and Abraham Bolin and the first 6 trustees, which also included Reverend James Thomas of Newburgh. And I just pointed this out because I wanted to read a little quote from what Reverend Thomas had to say back in 1870. And he said this: "Resolve to give your children all the education possible. Haven't we been hewers of wood and drawers of water long enough? Haven't we blackened our master's boots and stood behind his table till our hearts are sick and sore? Now is the time to do for ourselves. Let us write our names up high on the niche of fame. Be men, be women, be true to the right everywhere at all times." And I think there's a small, if we just move one slide, an excerpt. You probably can't read it from there, but that's the original quote where it was taken from. Now I have to ask, there's always been a certain mystery around how these hewers of wood and drawers of water managed to raise the necessary funds for the college's endorsement. You know, you had only two other black colleges in New York, Oneida and New York Central, that had already closed by the 1860s, more or less, for lack of funds. You know, even despite the backing of Astor family fortunes like Garrett Smith, we know that the radical abolitionist Henry Highland Garnett, who was also a trustee, was president of Avery College in Pennsylvania. That closed in 1873. Hiram Revels, I could go on. The United States' first black senator was also president of Alcorn University and a trustee of Toussaint Louverture College. He had to resign for criticizing the tenure of former Confederates in the college. So, all of this to say, that after the Civil War, clearly HBCUs depended heavily on federal government land grants and investment through the Freedmen's Bureau and a lot of white philanthropy. So there's historically just been so much conjecture and so much speculation around Toussaint. And a lot of it, we should say, used extremely negatively to discredit the college, earning it the reputation of a Marxist boot camp or a revolutionary seedbed. So just for our purposes today, is it possible to clear the air a little bit around the mystery around Toussaint Louverture's financial backings?
Okay. First of all, I need to point out that this question has been so deeply offensive to me. And I'm not taking offense at you personally for adopting the rhetoric of those who've never had our school's best interests at heart. I mean, we've seen recently, for example, the way in which former Harvard president Claudine Gay, who was the daughter of Haitian immigrants, I might add, was subjected to 5 hours of some of the most insulting and degrading treatment I have ever seen before a United States congressional committee. You know, that should be a reminder to everyone that toppling Black people, especially Black women, from positions of power and influence has always been the agenda of those people, white and Black people, who want to reinforce the structure of racism. Now, those asking the kinds of questions you're asking me need to ask themselves, and I am not plagiarizing here, I am quoting Toni Morrison, let's get that straight. You know, what are you without racism, right? You know, if you can only be tall when someone is on their knees, then you have a serious problem.
That's right.
Right? So I trust you as an artist are coming from a place that has a little bit more intellectual honesty than others. So I'm going to share with you this little legend around the early days of Toussaint. Around the time that Isaac Deo and Abraham Bolam began meeting to discuss the idea of founding this college, an interesting thing happened. The Dutchess County chapter of the American Colonization Society suddenly dissolved, and along with it, $100,000 vanished. That's a lot of money in those days, right? And this was for a group that had been raising funds to send African Americans, with or without their consent, to a far-flung colony in Liberia. You know, the notes of the recording secretary, who happened to be Matthew Vassar himself, have not been found, ever. You know, and 2 years after Matthew Vassar's death, when Toussaint Louverture College was finally incorporated by an act in the New York legislature, the trustees were informed that a trust for our college had been anonymously established 2 years prior in the amount of $100,000. You know, and to this day, we have no idea who that trustee was. It's not been revealed. And people have speculated that maybe it was Matthew Vassar, that nearing the end of his life, he was swayed more by the college trustee and longtime abolitionist Henry Ward Beecher, and not as swayed by the other trustee, Samuel Morse, who was an avowed slavery apologist. Okay, so it's possible that this anonymous trust was established as a form of reparations for the sons and daughters of those who had been gradually emancipated in New York after 1827. I don't know if we'll ever know.
Well, I think we've made some news today. For those who didn't know, now you know. And I think it's worth pointing out that that would have been the first time that New York State would have paid reparations, not to the generations of the enslavers, which it had, but actually to those who had been enslaved.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, another quote coming here. No plagiarism, from Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and in her dissent to the recent Supreme Court case that was striking down affirmative action in higher education, and she said, "What was true in the 1860s and again in 1954 is true today. Equality requires acknowledgement of inequality." All right.
You know, I'm sure everyone is dying to ask, and so I'm not going to phrase this in the form of a question, but rather, after 150 years, Toussaint Louverture has managed to maintain that endowment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you know, there's an old saying that says, when America gets a cold, Black Americans get tuberculosis.
No.
So after every economic crisis, whether it was 1928 or 2008, Toussaint has survived because we were never dependent on maintaining a traditional campus like most colleges and universities. You know, ironically, it's the itinerant campus model college started out with that allowed Toussaint to survive, right? And in a way, we actually integrated the same schools that would shut us out because they rented us their garrets and their basements and their bungalows. You know, they had not been willing to enroll Black students, and Vassar actually didn't admit its first Black student, Dr. Beatrice McCleary Hamburg, until 1944, right? So
those are the facts.
Yeah.
Those are the facts. Okay, so on a lighter note, I'm sure many of you know or can speculate on what makes a typical Vassar College student. I would like to know if you could describe what might one describe as a typical Toussaint Louverture College student.
Well, there is a culture that runs deep among us. You know, we celebrate those that adhere to the tradition and those who push against the grain. And that's how we renew ourselves. You know, this is how we remain with a gospel that is relevant, how we avoid turning into ossified and stale beings or an institution. It's what allows us to build solidarity among students, whether they're from Algeria or Afghanistan, Angola, Alabama, right? It's the recognition that our struggles all intersect, and that builds our foundation. And it's along those edges and where our struggles meet that we are the strongest.
Amazing. Okay, Dr. Hemmings, I can't express what a privilege it's been to have you here this evening. And I know it might be a little too soon to make an official announcement, but perhaps it's safe to mention that a very important matching endowment in today's equivalent to that first $100,000 back in 1870 has been promised. I think it might be safe to say. And it is without a doubt that Toussaint Louverture College will continue to bear fruit like the tree that was seeded long ago. As Toussaint Louverture himself said, the roots are many and are deep. If those of you are wondering what the college motto might translate to, many roots, and they are indeed deep, and they will continue to shoot again.
For another 150 years.
For hopefully another 150 years. I wish you all the success that you clearly do deserve, and we honor you, Dr. Hemmings, as your tenure as a professor, and we have a little gift for you for tonight's appearance. So from one of our sister's colleges. Unfortunately, there was only one ridiculous size available, so it might fit your husband, Brad, who's there, a little bit better. So I'm sure he'll wear it. I'm sure he'll wear it proudly.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you. Thank you. We honor you, Dr. Hemmings.
Thank you. Thank you. This is great.
So I think we'll open it up now for questions, speculative questions, maybe larger, more. It is large, larger questions from those who want to know more about Toussaint.
Tell us about the logo of the school.
Yes. Well, I did have a little part in the rebranding of it, I should say. So we mentioned the motto "Radices multe," many roots. The sword and the pen were sort of equally the tools of Toussaint Louverture in his battle against the colonizer. And the bat is reference to one of the most prevalent and indigenous, small I indigenous animals to the island of Haiti. And the tree is a reference to the roots, and then the laurel is also that symbol of that consequential, brief yet consequential victory of Toussaint Louverture's troops over Napoleon Bonaparte in the Haitian Revolution. Yeah. Well, the crown is a reference to, I mean, there are several references to, I think Bard College also has a crown. The Bard College motto, since it's also my alma mater, Dabo tibi coronam vitae, I give thee the crown of life, to quote from Revelation. So that crown of life has been also something that in education finds itself symbolically in many a college seal. Yeah.
And we are royalty.
And thank you.
We are kings and queens.
Kings and queens. That's right. That's right.
Did you have a question?
Last question. Well, I mean,
Something to think about.
yeah. As a college, you know, for Toussaint Louverture to have in its charter, you know, the idea that there would be a parity in pay between professors who happen to be men or women or whichever gender, that would not have been an issue from 1870 onwards, is an example that many colleges could probably keep in mind when it comes to negotiating
There's a lot of head
contracts.
nodding here. Yeah.
It was just one example out of many.
A good one.
Great question.
I'm not sure I'm at liberty to say that.
I think Dave Chappelle was on the list.
No, he was not. No.
Sort of. It's an evolving list. It's an evolving list. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Great question. We'll get back.
you.
We'll get back. That'll
Now
also
we're
be
gonna
on.
fight.
It'll all be on. Also be on the website. Yeah. Well, if anyone wants to share more speculatively, I'll be here hanging out. You know, feel free to come up and ask me or Dr. Hemmings any questions. But otherwise, thank you for coming out and listening and witnessing of the history that could have been, should have been, and that is still in one way or another part of this college, and education in general, I think, is a topic that is something worth speculating on as far as the city, the state, and the country as a whole. So thank you for coming out.
Thank you.